All right, let's jump right in. So when I say the word wetland, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Is it a swamp, a marsh? Maybe you think of a bog or a fen. The thing is, we have so many different names for these places, and honestly, it can get kind of confusing.
I mean, just think about the variety out there. You've got the famous Camargue in southern France, with those incredible white horses. And then you have the bayous of Louisiana, which are a world away. These water-rich landscapes have their own local names, their own vibes, and they look and feel completely different from each other.
So that leads to the big question, right? Underneath all this variety, what's the one thing they all share? How can a scientist look at a marsh in Iraq and a bog in Canada and say, yep, they're both wetlands? What's the secret formula here? Well, it turns out there actually is a formula. Scientists have come up with this really solid three-part framework that they can use on any wetland anywhere in the world. It cuts right through all the confusion and gets to the core of what makes a wetland, well, a wetland. The best way to think about it comes from this classic textbook called Wetlands, which describes it as a three-legged stool. And that analogy is just perfect, isn't it? For a stool to actually stand up, you need all three legs. If you kick one out, the whole thing collapses. It's a brilliant way to picture it.
So what are these three legs? It's pretty simple, really. Water, soil, and life. Now, to get a little more specific, scientists call them hydrology, hydric soils, and hydrophytes. But don't worry, let's break down exactly what each of those means.
Okay, first up, and this is the big one, is water, the hydrology. This is the master ingredient that drives everything else. But get this, and this might surprise you. The water doesn't actually have to be there all year round. The ground just needs to be saturated for long enough during the growing season to totally change the entire character of the ecosystem. Next up, leg number 2 is the soil. See, when water is constantly present, it completely changes the soil's chemistry. It basically pushes all the oxygen out. This creates what scientists call hydric soil. And trust me, this is not the same as the dirt in your backyard. It's usually dark, kind of mucky, and it even smells different because of all the unique microbial activity that's happening in there without oxygen. And that brings us to our third and final leg, life. Not just any plant can survive in that waterlogged, oxygen-starved soil. It would just rot. It takes plants with special adaptations. These tough, specialized survivors are called hydrophytes. And when you see them, that's the final, living confirmation that you are, in fact, standing in a wetland. So when you bring these three ingredients together, the water, that special soil, and those super adapted plants, you don't just get wetland. You create an entirely new kind of ecosystem. It's a whole world that's truly in between. This here shows the chain of command perfectly. See, it all starts with the hydrology, the water. That water is what creates the unique soil conditions. And then, the water and the soil together basically set the rules for what kinds of plants and animals, what scientists call the biota, can actually call that place home. Everything flows from the water. Scientists have a specific name for these in-between places. They're called ecotones. And wetlands are pretty much the ultimate ecotones. They act like this living, breathing bridge between two completely different worlds. The dry, terrestrial world of forests and fields, and the deep, aquatic world of lakes and oceans. This diagram just lays it all out perfectly. Over on the far left, you've got your dry land, the terrestrial system. On the far right, you've got the deep water aquatic system. And what's sandwiched right there in the middle? The wetland. It's this transitional zone with its fluctuating water levels and this unique power to store and transform nutrients. It's truly its own distinct realm. And here's the really cool part. It's kind of like a chef using the same basic ingredients to make different dishes. Nature uses the same three wetland components to create vastly different landscapes. So if the dominant plants are soft-stemmed things like grasses and reeds, you get a marsh. But if they're woody plants, like trees and shrubs, you get a swamp. Same ingredients, just a different recipe. Okay, so why have we spent all this time geeking out on this definition? Why does this whole three-legged stool idea matter outside of a science textbook? Well, because getting the definition right is the absolute first step toward actually taking care of these places. I mean, think about it. How can you map something if you can't agree on what it is? How can you write a law to protect it or a plan to restore it if you can't clearly define where it begins and ends? You can't. A consistent scientific definition is the foundation for everything. Without it, these vital ecosystems just slip through the cracks. And they are so, so vital. One of the most powerful ways to think about what a wetland does is that they're the kidneys of the landscape. It's a great metaphor. Just like our kidneys filter our blood, wetlands filter water. They trap pollutants, they absorb floodwaters like a giant sponge, and they recharge groundwater. They're basically cleaning and stabilizing the entire watershed. So it all really comes down to this. If we recognize that these amazing in-between worlds are the landscape's vital organs, performing a job that nothing else can, we have to ask ourselves a pretty tough question. How well are we actually doing at protecting them?